I'm looking at part 7 here. We're beginning with folic acid, and we're still on page 912 of our nutrition metabolism chapter. And let's take a look here at folic acid. Some of you may be tuned into folic acid, and it's very important as a nutrient in pregnant women because we have something called neural tube syndrome that happens in developing infants with regard to a lack of dietary support for pregnant women in many cases. So here we go. This is folic acid, and what are we doing here? We're actually synthesizing DNA. That's one of the big things that happens here. If you look at some antibiotics, you'll notice that some antibiotics actually work at the DNA level. Very heavy-duty antibiotics, you'll pick those out. They actually they interrupt DNA synthesis at the folate step, right? So a lot of times when we're using antibiotics for required means, maybe you want to add folic acid to your diet. Foods rich in folic acid, a supplement of B complex. This is one of the many B complex vitamins that's found. Okay, so where would we find folate? Also is, and it says coenzyme in nucleic acid and amino acid metabolism. And folate here is listed as B9. I don't know if you can make that out. There it is, B9. Okay, so the fonts are very small there. Okay, B9 now is included in this grouping over at the protein synthesis amino acid transfers B6, B9, biotin. And who is responsible for providing our folic acid to us? As it turns out, I picked 4 things because there's a lot of women in our classroom and a lot of moms in our classroom, and I want you to be absolutely sure. And this is the order in which the heavy hitters really do exist. Spinach at the top, which is not such a big surprise, not fresh. Never eat spinach fresh. It has oxalic acid in it, and it will actually deplete calcium from the bone matrix. Cook your spinach. Please cook your spinach. It could be fried, it could be steamed, it could be boiled in a soup. There's a variety of ways, but it needs to be cooked. What you might not have been expecting is romaine, this high in the listings. When we think of lettuce, we don't often think of it as being very rich, but in this case it is. It's got this B complex vitamin, folic acid. So without too many calories added to the diet, you can get your folic acid. Asparagus and broccoli. I'm sorry to give you so many, but folic acid is just that important because we have antibiotics in our world that deplete folic acid, and it is because we have moms who are pregnant with babies who need the folic acid. So that's that shift right there, that situation. As we move on to the next item here, we get to B12. B12 is a special situation because we need so little of it. We need only 2 micrograms per day, and that's just a wild estimate and probably an overestimate. It turns out that we can actually store vitamin B12 for very long periods of time, up to 10 years in some cases. So we don't need very much. If you happen to come across some of the foods that are rich, I'm trying to stay away here from the liver sources, and I'm listing you clams and oysters. And then most important of all, it says here vegans may take a yeast-based supplement, and then it says note further that the intestinal bacteria supplies vitamin B complex and B complex to the blood directly through the intestinal wall. Some of this, and that's a large intestine feature. It says it takes approximately 20 years of consuming a diet essentially free from B12 for a person to begin to exhibit injury to the neural system. And so the reason that people lack B12 in their diet is rarely because they miss it in their food. It's there. It's in the food, and it's not needed in very great supply. If you have something of the meat persuasion, you will automatically, any meat whatsoever, get more than you need, and you'll get to keep it for a very long time. So I need you to understand it from that perspective. So here we are at B12, and since we're here, what is the name of B12? It goes by several different names, usually with different prefixes. In this case, we are just basically need to call it cobalamin. So if you see cobalamin, it could be methylcobalamin, it could be cyanocobalamin. There's a number of different ones that are listed. The professor that I worked with in medical school who was teaching this indicated that if we went to McDonald's once every 8 or 10 years, we'd be done. He was just joking, of course. None of us go to McDonald's, right? But at any rate, the deal is that probably a vegan would have no problem in a rich diet getting it from their flora. So that's the only detail right there. What do you need to know about further is that there's this thing called intrinsic factor that's secreted by the parietal cells of the pits, the stomach pits, along with hydrochloric acid, and as a result, this molecule has to bind. The only people that we know of, really, in clinical studies, is that lacks vitamin B12 would be people who lack intrinsic factor, and there are people who are born. Small children are born with a lack of intrinsic factor. It becomes clear at a certain point that that's the situation, and they end up having to get injections or help in general with the uptake of that nutrient. So that's a special case. Okay, so then we get to one of our favorites, vitamin C. It's called ascorbic acid. It's the chemical name for it. This is a mild amount. These days they're actually administering really vast amounts by drip to some of the patients, especially the ones in China that were successful at recovering from COVID-19. Who are the heavy hitters here? And this one is green peppers, cauliflower, broccoli. So if you know it in that order, the industry actually gets, as an extract, they use green peppers, bell peppers, as part of their sourcing for natural extract of vitamin C. So, and you can find it in many places. Look at the foods that are where it's available, and let's take a look over here at the table with the figure here. And basically, I've listed vitamin. Oh, and I forgot to put the C in there. Sort of an odd thing to miss. Vitamin C. There we go. Vitamin C is joined by magnesium in the synthesis of collagen. So you need to know that for the rest of your life. This is the lack of vitamin C and magnesium can lead to scurvy. It would take a long time. You would have to be on a ship sailing the seas in the 1500s and 1600s. There were people, in fact, in that situation, sailing the seas between Europe and South America, and then South America and the Philippines and China, and delivering in one direction gold and silver, in the other direction the goods of China, such as porcelain and silk and things like that. So we got to know all about the lack of vitamin C and magnesium from people who never ended up eating vitamins and fruit and that sort of thing. So that ends this particular portion, and we'll pick up the next portion. We'll just keep on going till we hit all of the vitamins and minerals.